Good afternoon and welcome to Just Jocelyn. I'm your host, Jocelyn, and I am excited to have two fabulous guests with me today. And we're going to be talking about, some of you may think, an old subject, but there's nothing old about voting. There's nothing old about ballot machines, and there's nothing old about cheating. We've had that since the beginning of time, and it hasn't stopped. And I'm here to tell you that we're fighting back, not physically. We're just saying we're going to push back. We're going to fight back. We're going to fight back with facts. We're going to fight back with everything we've got. Our vote, your vote, my vote must count. And it can't be going off to some ether country or some computer where they fiddle with it, where we have votes coming in for a month. We've got votes coming in for 6 weeks. And then, we've got absentee ballots being expanded, kind of like Medicare expansion. So we now have ballot expansion. We've got mail-in ballots. We have got so much cheating and lying and unconstitutional things going on in our voting process in the United States of America that you should be sick. You should be upset. You should be mad. Not that I am, but I am. So welcome to the show. We have Al Brandano and Michael Bean.
Thank you
for coming. It's my pleasure. So where should we start about all of this? I mean, I can tell you that I learned all about this from Marilyn Todd. Okay. And we sort of bumped into each other, and she was talking about voter fraud on those tally tapes. I call them ticker tapes. Tally tapes, and that there was wrong dates on them and this and this. And I thought, well, I can go down to my town hall and make copies. Isn't that funny? I have a great town clerk, so I could, but many people couldn't. And I'm looking at these tapes, and the chase was on. Yeah. Cheating, lying, manipulation. I can't believe any of it anymore.
That's a problem. You see, the more you see, the more you question. Mm-hmm. The more you question, the deeper it leads you. And it's what we've uncovered is quite disturbing. But we went down to. I met Marilyn Todd in Windham and got involved in the Windham election down there. I was very pleased that our senators at that time voted. Was it 24-0 to have that?
I believe it was, yeah.
14-10. And it was the only, I think, the last universal vote we've had. Mm-hmm. But thank God they did that. I wish they had done all of Windham, not just the questionable races, the rep races. If they had done the entire election.
I didn't realize that. They only did certain races?
Sure.
Just the ones in question?
Just the rep questions. I believe so, sure, yeah.
For some reason, I thought once it got into the big leagues, they did them all. Yeah. Oh, dear.
Yes.
Oh, dear.
And then, of course, the questions that came out of that led to, what is actually taking place? And it cast all kinds of doubt. And I was telling Al earlier, I had read a Politico article after the 2020 Iowa caucuses, when they had the debacle out there and ended up not calling a vote for months.
Months, right.
And then New Hampshire was to follow. And Politico wrote an article about why New Hampshire won't be the next Iowa. And it was basically a left-leaning Politico article, but it went into detail about questions that Democrats had about our election process as well. And then in the later part of the article, it mentioned LHS Associates. And I got very interested in why a third party was overseeing our machines. And that I started asking a lot of questions after that. Okay. And that's led us on a journey that led Al and myself and another individual to eventually to the DOJ. And our New Hampshire DOJ, we asked them point blank, who's responsible for our machines? Mm-hmm. And is it the Secretary of State's office or is it the Department of Justice? Mm-hmm. It's neither. It's each individual community. So when you think about the fact that your town makes that decision and they are responsible for the oversight, mm-hmm. you start wondering, who is doing the oversight on the code of those machines? There's nobody in your community that can read that code.
Right, and there's nobody that actually touches it. It's comes from LHS. We know the machines are old.
Sure.
We know that they're, I think, 35 years old, and we know they were only supposed to be on a trial basis for 3 years, and here we are 35 years later plus.
Right.
They don't have enough memory cards. They don't have any backups. We know in court, you and I were there, and the Secretary of State and the AG admitted on the record that they had the cables cut internally, the modem cables, and they were never recertified. And we know that from the expert witness, Wayne Saya, that they've never been recertified ever. And then we found out that every time they do a maintenance of significance, they have to be recertified.
Never done. It's never done.
I think something is even more powerful that Michael brought up, and I don't think selectmen understand their responsibility because no one's really told them. The town itself is on the hook, right? And that's something you said very importantly, and we got this from the Department of Justice at our meeting, is that, 9/10 of the law, is me speaking here, is possession. They have possession. So that means possession means maintenance, security, programming. The last security update on the machines was April 9th, 2010 across New Hampshire. I'm talking about security update. April 9th, 2010. So you can imagine if you haven't updated your Macintosh or your,
Your
whatever,
Apple or your
Apple
Linux
or whatever in
whatever.
that period of time. That's a fact, right? So
2010, they've not had a
April
security
9
update?
April 9th, 2010 to be exact. But the other part of this situation is that remember that there is we also know this from the Department of Justice and the Secretary of State 91A requests, is that there's no chain of custody. So those whatever's programmed on those cards, the microchip cards, that the reader, it's the part that goes in and reads the actual count, even though the machine, very importantly, is in test mode, not in run mode. Those data cards and what's on them is an algorithm. That algorithm is not allowed to be read by anybody. It's closed source. Proprietary. So the Secretary of State can't even read what's on it. So they're supposed to have a copy of that card at the Secretary of State's office. In the past, the 91A requests that we have said they didn't have them. Recently, as of this last year, they say they do have them, but they're not readable without permission from LHS. The other part of this, all the maintenance on the machines is contractual basis, and the towns keep paying for this maintenance on an ongoing basis, and they don't realize
Thousands of dollars.
don't realize they're the responsible party.
And the moderators we've interviewed have acknowledged that it's beyond their scope to be able to know to read that code. Nobody in your community is actually responsible for the code, which is why at one point in my town I put forth a warrant article to eliminate the machines, simply because there's nobody that can read the code and tell you what's on it.
So in simple terms, because I'm the translator, so these memory cards, of which there's not enough, I think they have one for each machine and a backup, which allegedly that backup should fit in any one of those machines if something goes wrong. But we don't know what's on that card. We assume that John and Jill and Jack are running for selectmen and Amy's running for school board. So we assume that what we're filling out on our ballots is exactly what is on these memory cards. But there is no way to tell.
And that it's going to read it that way.
Correct. Sure. So we don't know if there's an algorithm on there. We don't know what's on there. And here's the clincher. So in 2020, when I first got involved in this, it was a federal election. So therefore, the law states they must keep that memory card for 22 months. That's almost 2 years. That's 2 months short of 2 years. They're supposed to keep them, not return them to LHS. But what happened in every single solitary town, except for Wyndham, God only knows why they didn't, but they're supposed to stay. But they don't. They immediately package them up, return them because, oh, we have a town election in a month or two. They've got to rewrite them and put all the new names on them. Well, I'm sorry, what is the point of laws when they're not going to follow them?
You just said something really interesting. You used the word immediately. That's actually written in RSA 65642. They actually, the Secretary of State or whoever was responsible for writing 65642 and amending it, actually made the words in violation of federal law to allow those cards to be returned immediately. The second part you need to know, and everyone needs to know, is if you go through a red light camera, right? Usually sometimes you go to court and I don't believe the cameras can be used against you. My understanding is, and I'm not a lawyer, but what they do say is that if you can't swear an affidavit to something, then you can't attest to it. The machine has activity logs.
Correct.
Every time they go into that machine and they do certain maintenance or whatever, that activity log needs to be filled out.
Correct.
We've won in Kensington and Rye, all across the state of New Hampshire. The town clerks, moderators have not formally, when they've done maintenance on the machines, they haven't been filled out. It's required to have 2 witnesses, the specific reasons.
And not the town clerk and the moderator.
But anyway, regardless, none of these things, if you go in your town, you'll find the same problem. So no one knows, because there's no testimony on that, because that's your affidavit when they sign that, what maintenance was really done on the machine. They take out a motherboard, which is hardware.
Correct.
Once again, hardware is, it says in RSA 65642 that if you, any change to the hardware, when the hardware is changed, there's no serial numbers. So think about we don't know what's going in the machines because there's not an original list of parts, and we don't know what they're putting in now. So for the last 30-something years, I hope they're putting in the parts that they started with, but who knows?
We don't know.
We don't know. No. Once again, and who's responsible? The selectmen.
Yeah. And you addressed memory cards, but we had a situation here in Exeter where they had a machine fail.
Yes.
And they replaced the memory card. We don't know what memory card went into the machine. It's unidentified. It's not in the activity logs. There's no record of it. We know one came out. We know they swapped it out. They broke the seals, they resealed, but they never told you what the memory card number is. There's no identification for it.
Wow.
There's no record of any testing when they put it in the machine and put it back into use.
Right. They just change out the card, okay, we're good to go.
But don't identify it.
But
we don't even know that. We don't even know the card
But that's
number.
insane, because in working 911 for the amount of years that I did, if you used a medication, you had to write down the lot number and the date and the this. If I went to the hospital because one of the meds had expired, I had to give them the lot number, the date, and that was the one that went out. And then I had to track what is the one that came in to replace it. So how on God's green earth are we not tracking anything in these voting machines?
So let's think about this for a second. In all of New Hampshire, no one has ever audited a Senate race. And thank God.
Never?
Never, thank God. 7 towns in a Senate race. So we have been blessed in Rockingham County, unfortunately, with the loss. Either candidate, doesn't matter. This is not a Republican or a Democrat thing, right? You've got to remember that.
Correct.
This is not. Because 3% can go one way, 3% can go the other way later on. And as we've learned from a montage of Democrats when Hillary Clinton lost, it was the same thing. Somebody stole an election. So it can go either way. This is critical and more important for all of us. It has nothing to do with Democrat, Republican, or you can be a Martian. I don't really care. But what is important is Lou Gargiulo deserves an amazing amount of credit, because he allowed these volunteers. We have 700 hours of volunteers like us that put in.
Plus,
and we did a recount at his request, with his request and his attorney's request with the Ballot Law Commission.
Great. I went up to Concord and helped you with that. Okay.
And this 200-page addendum and 66-page report outlines a total failure of selectmen, for moderators and town clerks to follow in 7 towns the best practices, policy, and procedures, and RSAs. Unbelievable.
And not just the towns. Responsibility of the Secretary of State
and the AG
in the chain of custody.
Yep.
And then what it leads to is looking at the fact that you're dealing with repetitive violations and no accountability. So we have Exeter that was issued cease and desist order for violations in 2018 election, reported in 2019, released with a cease and desist, and the same violations in 2022. And there's no accountability, there's no repercussion. It just continues. And if the report that we read and reported on in Wyndham is correct, what was the number one finding in 2020? A folded ballot.
Correct.
And a crease through the ovals.
Correct.
And it occurred again in 2022.
Right. I did hear that.
Lord, how is that possible? After such a nationally
such a big stink and
why
hoopla.
are we
Why are we
folding
still here?
ballots? Why are we folding ballots to
at all?
begin with?
a national event. Yeah.
So ultimately, first talk to me, what is a failure of the chain of custody? Tell us what is chain of custody and what's a failure?
Oh Lord. So per the RSAs and the election manual, all of the towns are required to use labels and put that label on boxes that contain ballots, ballot materials, and that chain of custody begins the minute the election ends, and those ballots go into storage at the town. And put in storage and signed for. Anytime those ballots are accessed, entered at all, for any reason, it has to be identified on that chain of custody log.
Okay. So kind of like at the police with evidence.
Absolutely. And it tracks them. We had 3 towns that had no chain of custody form whatsoever. What happened to their ballots from night of election to when they went to the recount? There's no knowledge whatsoever of what took place.
We don't know if anybody went in them. We don't know if
so is
there also something about the boxes that you can't just put it in the pancake box? You know, that you can't put it in the stovetop stuffing. And I'm really not trying to be funny, but there's something important about the boxes.
Very specific. Yes, it is very specific. The boxes are provided by the Secretary of State. They are 2 different colors. You have red ink on some of the boxes, blue ink on other boxes. And those are for specific reasons. Ballots go in red inked boxes. Absentee materials go in blue boxes. But what we found across many of the towns is that we had boxes, we had absentee materials in red boxes. We had ballots in blue boxes. We had boxes marked uncast ballots with cast ballots in them. We had boxes that are supposed to have a ballot count on them with an X, no count whatsoever. We had no moderator signatures. We had no selectman signatures. We had no timestamps. We had no clerk stamps. We had no record. Period.
And the big one was the chain of custody. So in other words, the box moves that night from the event to a secure area at your town, in case there needs to be a recount. Then the Secretary of State sends somebody over. There is a form that requires, once again, 2 signatures. It's the affidavit. I think, what was it, 100% failure?
Yeah, in one town it was 100%.
One town was 100% failure.
Yeah.
7 of the 4 towns failed. 4 of the 7 towns failed. Even a chain of custody. So we don't even know where the boxes were or where they ended up.
And equally important, we have visuals from the actual recount where they brought the boxes in.
I remember Linda running around. That's how I was introduced to the boxes and the tape, and how half the tape is off and half the tape is on, and some does and some doesn't, and some are twisted.
And tape that said void, opened, so you know that the boxes have been accessed. Labels floating. Labels transferred, boxes with multiple numbers. You're supposed to have a tracking number, a coded chain of custody number applied to the box. And you get a box that has a number on this side and a different number on this side. So the system is broken. It needs to be fixed so that when someone asks you, but was the election result good? There's no possible way to know. because
there was a catastrophic failure on every level.
on every level, right? So, and New Hampshire says it does not have a mail-in system.
Yeah, they do. It's called the expanded absentee ballots. Like you have Medicare expansion, we've got absentee ballot expansion.
So you request your ballot by mail and it goes back by mail, but you can't verify a signature. But even when you go there, you have discrepancies in the checklists. You have same-day discrepancies. And so when you start at the beginning and you start tracking it down through what is supposed to happen from prior to the election to post-election recount, when it's out of control from day one all the way through, how do you put any validity to it? You can't put any confidence in the outcome. And there's no possible way to.
And I think that's how Lou closed with them, and Lou's attorney, you can watch the video, it's amazing, at the Ballot Law Commission. Lou basically said, I don't want to put words in his mouth, that we don't know who won. Yeah. He's accepted, he has agreed to their outcome.
Yeah.
But no one today, none of us could tell you.
So his purpose of this addendum and this presentation was to show the catastrophic failure, not, oh, I lost and oh, I want this, but we can't trust anything at this point.
Actually, it was to find out.
Okay.
Not to prove it, it was to find out. And Lou would say, I hear everybody complaining about machines. I want to know, can we trust our machines or can't we? And so the only way to find out, he said, let's put an end to that argument once and for all. Do the damn recount, get the data, and they're either going to be good or they're not going to be good. What we found is machine discrepancies that are flagrant. So we're back to, I'm not going to say it's healthy. I'm not going to say it's good. I'm not going to say I can tell because of what we found.
Correct. And
repetitive violations. So once again, the question is still on the table. But Lou's intent originally was, look, I hear this, I hear that, let's find out.
Yep.
Let's get the data and learn it and find out. Do your due diligence, and that'll be the end of it. And so his initial was to put an end to some of those questions.
I like it.
And instead, we end up with more questions.
With more questions. Yeah. So this is so important. I think we've only barely scratched the surface. Is it okay if we take a quick break and we come back and continue this?
It's whatever you like to do.
Because I think there's an awful lot of information that we haven't touched on that I think people need to know. And talking about the Constitution, talking about what Daniel Richard has found.
Oh, sure.
Going forward, what people can do, who they can reach out to, because I know you have a website where you can send information from your town, because you have all of my town.
Yep, it's called Hand Count, H-A-N-D, count, nh.com. And you can send information from your town if you need it posted for information for people to see really what's going on. There's an amazing amount of information there. And my personal goal, was to return to hand count for a specific reason, is that I think it will build unity. It'll bring people together, bring Republican, Democrat, everyone together at the table. We've done many a recount, so we've seen, and it is a healthy and it's a good way to create civics. And, any machine can be hacked. We all know that. We don't have to be.
Right.
And now poll books, we've added another level of more stuff. So personally, my personal thing is I'd love to return to hand count. Let that be known.
Okay. So let's take a quick break here and we'll come right back and continue this conversation, because I thought we could get through this, but we haven't. There's way too much that we need to share with everybody.
Sure.
So we're going to take a quick break and we will be back in a minute. Welcome back to Just Jocelyn. This is part 2 of I am feeling, and I hope you are too, a very important part of our rights to vote and what is going on in this state. I'm sure it's going on all over the nation, but right now all we can worry about is the state of New Hampshire. So we're going to continue this discussion because it actually gets worse and worse. And it's not something that you can just brush off and go, oh, okay, well, there is no next time. If you look at some of the comments that Daniel Richard has said that we have not had a legal, constitutional election since I think he said 1979 because of absentee ballots. This should raise the hair on your arms and the hair on the back of your necks. This is not something to be taken lightly. There are countries out there where people would literally kill to be able to vote. They would do anything for their right to vote. And we've got Butterfingers. We're ignoring it. You're too busy. You can't do it. You can't take time off. This is garbage. This is the United States of America, and this needs to be fixed now because the consequences of what's happened for the last 2 or 3 votes, maybe 4, 5, 6 votes, could have changed this country from where it is right now. So welcome back, Michael.
Thank you.
Welcome back, Al.
Thank you very much.
So talk to me a little bit, because for us here in New Hampshire, this began in Wyndham.
It did, yeah.
And it went national. It went international, actually. And there were all sorts of people, and there was a vote. We're going to have a recount. We're going to have experts. We're going to this. We're going to that. And then, it fell flat on its face, and everything got even dirtier than it was when we started. Talk to me about these auditors, these people.
Well, I think the initial fail is that we were supposed to have 3 independent auditors looking at it. That's what was agreed upon originally. And ultimately what we ended up with were, we had Mark Lindemann from Verified Voting, but Harry Hursty became a second auditor, and Harry was on the board of advisors of Verified Voting. And then we had Phil Stark as a third auditor, who actually worked as far back as 2012 with Mark Lindemann, publishing papers on risk-limiting audits, et cetera. They all knew each other very, very well. Andrew Appel is also from Verified Voting, and he oversaw that election and then wrote up the Wyndham election analysis, Part 1 and Part 2. And he was very specific about some of the flaws that took place and what New Hampshire needs to do about it.
Okay.
We've not done that. Now,
Surprise, surprise.
Now, part of that is putting risk-limiting audits in place, and risk-limiting audits are, yes, a
Is
source
money,
of,
money, money, money,
it's a
money.
source of funds, and if they're not done properly, they don't satisfy the result. They don't determine
So again,
the result.
more fingers in the pot, more people meddling,
Yes.
more outside sources.
Yes. Yeah.
When the answer is hand count, because the New Hampshire Constitution says the moderator shall sort and count in an open meeting with the town clerk and the selectmen and or counselors.
But what bothers me most about the auditors that were selected is that the state has not paid attention to what they have said. They hired them to audit Wyndham, but they don't give them any credence when Mark Lindemann or Harry Hursty or Andrew Appel tells you that they know how to cheat and show you how to cheat a Dominion AccuVote machine. And it's as clear as day. It's in published articles, one after another, and they've sworn to it. So if you trust these people to do your
Then
auditing,
why didn't you fix it?
why wouldn't you trust them when they tell you that your machines can be programmed to cheat? And it's really flagrant, but it's out there. It's readily available for anyone to see and read.
And so the Secretary of State and the AG have done nothing about it, let alone the towns, because everything does trickle down. I don't care what they say that, your town's in charge and your moderators, he can tell you what color pants you can wear when you want to vote. Because, that's literally how they're behaving. They're the Gestapo at this point.
I provided those articles to my town selectmen. I don't know that they read them.
I doubt it.
But we tried to put a warrant article through to say until you can show oversight of the machines and of the programming of the machines, then we should be doing hand count. We hand counted for, 200 years, 200 plus years?
But Michael.
Wait a minute, we still have
We're
30% of the towns in New Hampshire
Still recount.
Still
hand count.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm curious, because I just fired off a 91A to find out how many times that they're wrong. Because I'm going to go in a different direction, but go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. So as far as hand count goes, we have 4,000, 5,000 people in town. Mm-hmm. It's a no-brainer to be able to hand count. And what I love most about it is that it brings the community
together.
They have to come together.
Yep.
No Republican, no Democrat is going to let the other count without the opposite being there.
Correct.
And now you have community coming together for a singular purpose, and it's to derive the correct outcome. And they have to communicate with one another. We've lost that.
Correct. It's the true assembly.
It is true assembly.
As it was originally intended in the New Hampshire Constitution.
And remember, the Constitution, not only the New Hampshire Constitution, but the U.S. Constitution, doesn't say efficiency over accuracy.
Right.
There's nothing that says, hey, because we can do this faster and we have machines to do it now, let's do it that way.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's nothing that institutes efficiency over accuracy.
So on that point, so if they really wanted, I want these machines, like a kid wants ice cream. I want these machines because I want all my town clerks and moderators to be happy. We don't want them to work too hard. And I'm not being facetious, I'm a little sarcastic, but they wanted those. So then why the double hockey sticks did they not amend the Constitution? If you're so smart, not you, but if they're so smart and you know all and you're omitting words and phrases and changing things because, the taxpayer and the citizens are stupid, because that's exactly what they're saying, why didn't you change the Constitution? Because now we wouldn't have this problem, but you didn't.
Because they used the word trial and they hoped, as with most people, would fall asleep.
And we did.
Falling asleep. And what is a trial? A trial has measurements, has this. But regardless, we're really to blame, right? We're to blame. All the stuff that we're talking about, we can blame the Secretary of State, we can blame the Department of Justice. We're to blame. Where do we fail? We have an election law committee, right? I don't know if they've enacted. We've been before them. There's been probably about 100 proposals before them in the last 3 years. I'm not sure how many they even passed from the people. Right? Mm-hmm. That's our first step, is the election law committee. You leave the election law committee, then you have a ballot law committee that some people say was created unconstitutionally. They have no say. We were at the hearing. They told us they really don't have any control over this.
Well, at the end of it, we have no authority. But yet for 2 years, you were acting like judge, jury, and...
You had a voter confidence thing that people, 50% of the population in New Hampshire does not believe, not across New Hampshire, but everywhere across the country is now suspect of elections. Voter confidence. They didn't enact virtually that I saw, anything that came out of the voter confidence thing. We spent a whole year, almost a year, going through that with the Secretary of State, people donating their time, volunteering, going everywhere to do this. So let's get back to where you said initially, accountability. There are only two ways in New Hampshire that you can get a felony. The only one is if you alter a machine or affect the machine, or you change a vote, you physically change a vote. Those are the two things that get you a felony. There has been no felonies in New Hampshire since all this started. No one's been accused or prosecuted on felony. Everything else in the RSAs is a misdemeanor. And those, if there's 39 maybe that you could be charged with. But what does the Department of Justice do? The Department of Justice, it's not really their fault, because they're saying, hey, the legislature did not give us the tools to go after these people to prosecute them. The problem is our own legislature, Republican, Democrat. We have a problem, and we need to get them on record from now on that they want to fix this process. Policy procedures are being violated. All it takes is one person to sue a town. When you violate a policy and procedures as much as they've done, the liability on that town is immense. And so we need to come back to accountability and responsibility. In the end, it comes up to us, because we need to hold our elected officials responsible.
So our legislators, why are they ignorant of the law? Why are they ignorant of the Constitution? And why? Because we, for at least 4 or 5 years, if not longer, have been screaming at the top of our lungs about unconstitutional, illegal matters of all different subjects. But definitely since 2020 and before, we've been talking about elections and who has the authority and who doesn't, and that they're supposed to make law. It's not the governor, it's not the judicial system, but yet they sit on their hands or they attack the people. You were there with me when we went and we served a remonstrance. We served the notice of trespass, liability, and what happens? Nothing. We all served our towns. What happened? Nothing. You go to the Secretary of State and the AG, and what do? Nothing. It's okay, Jocelyn. It's going to be okay, honey. It's all right. That's how they talk to me. That's how they talk to us.
But see, and here's where that's up to us. If we organize and we get people together and we go to the town and people start suing these towns because they're the responsible party and they all hold the bond, and the bondholders get responsible, money talks and bull crap walks.
Yeah.
Right? And it's up to us to get involved. And I'll share with you a piece of the Constitution, New Hampshire Constitution, Article 8, Article 38, but specifically Article 8. I want to just say, everyone, this is our duty. Look at the New Hampshire Constitution. It's our duty. Article 8 tells us we have the right to require of our lawgivers and magistrates an exact and constant observance of them in the formation and execution of the laws necessary for the good administration of the government. We have failed.
Is that independents? Or is that Republicans? Or is that Democrats?
That's all of us.
All.
100%.
Yes.
All of us.
Get
All of
off
us.
the couch, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. It's
Get off the
everyone.
couch and get involved. God help you.
And Al brought up the machines on a trial basis. But a trial would imply that you're going to try out the machine while you maintain using your paper ballots, because how do you know if your machine is working?
You don't.
If you haven't done the comparison.
Correct.
So we should have been counting for these last 20 some, how many years?
Where's
27.
the proof? Where's the
We
pudding?
should have been counting anyway.
Well, where are the statistics of all these comparisons? Are there any? I mean, I can't even find in any town anywhere the contracts
Liability
that we signed
the
for them.
towns have
No,
no
there is none.
idea the liability they're under. They really are.
No, we don't have a contract with them. My town, right, does not have a contract.
I can't find anything anywhere in my town,
But
nor that
there
we
are-
voted for it.
So without a doubt, there are laws that should be changed, but also the existing laws that are on the books really need to be enforced. We would go a long way to having them follow at least the procedures that are in place. Not that will resolve all issues.
Correct, but
we're
it's a start.
shopping. We're shopping today. The state is shopping today for new machines because the Dominion machines will no longer be used after 2024.
Well, they actually haven't had software, as you said, software updates
Since 2010.
Since 2010. There's been no security updates, but they also have not been updating anything since I think it was 2017. That they just go in and fiddle with it and replace with whatever parts they get from, this computer, that computer, God only knows where. So we're at an extreme disadvantage. But didn't they test them in Milford, Londonderry, Manchester?
Yes, they did test certain
New ones.
Yeah, certain brands, manufacturers, and I really don't know anything about that. But we did hear at the Ballot Law Commission
Correct.
prior to that they don't want to share their information, their proprietary information. And my suggestion would be whoever comes in and brings machines in must share the programming with personnel that are responsible for overseeing those machines.
Right.
Since, as Al so succinctly put, the selectmen are responsible for the decision, they're responsible for the outcome, they're responsible for the machines.
But
Then they should be able to verify.
But ultimately, aren't we, the taxpayers, we, the voters, deciding, yes, we want the machines or no, we don't want the machines?
No.
Because we're paying for it. It comes out of our money.
You don't have a decision. The people don't have a decision. It's only, it's what do you call it? When they have a vote under 39.3, you can request the vote through and when you have town, what's it called at the end of the year before they vote? It'll come to me.
Okay.
but anyway, they have that, and you can request for town meeting on 39.3, but remember, the selectmen did that without a town vote. The people are not, according to RSA 65640, the selectmen are the responsible party, not the town people.
Indirectly to what you suggest, Jocelyn.
So you have to understand the RSA. It's written specific for the selectmen to make the decision, not the people in the town.
But the selectmen we elect. So indirectly, by who we select for our, put into office as selectmen, we do have an indirect impact on, yes, whether we have machines based on the selectmen.
Not if we're using Dominion AccuVote machines.
And they don't know, but they don't know the information. They don't know the discrepancies. They don't know.
Well, they certainly do in my town because I've served them and you were there with me.
But here's why.
I mean the people.
I drive around Greenland. Greenland was the first one, and they had, support. What's the lady's name in Greenland? There was a town, Marge.
Yeah.
She was the town clerk. Support Marge. Yeah. Of course, everyone wants to support Marge. They want to support every town clerk. Why? In New Hampshire, you get your driver's license, you get your dog's registration, and they're wonderful people, right? 99% are wonderful, wonderful, and they do a great job, right, at that. So people emotionally think you're attacking Marge.
Correct. I've had that said to me. And
this is the problem. We're not attacking any town clerk,
right?
Anybody. We're just saying, here's the information, everybody. It never gets out. So how do they silence you? By not hearing you. You're being silenced by the DOJ. You're being silenced by look at the Secretary of State at the hearing that we just went to hear.
Yep.
What did he say? His comment was hurtful to all of us. It's better than it was 30 years ago. To me, that was hurtful. And I think Scanlon is a good man.
Yep.
I'm saying he could not have said something so hurtful to people in this state than to say something like that was despicable. And it was bumps and bruises, way more than that.
Yep.
So it's really important that people understand no one's attacking the town clerk. But to everyone's fault, we're not getting the information out for people to make an informed decision. And if they're not getting the information to make an informed decision, there's no more community newspapers.
Correct.
And thank God for this show.
Yep.
Right? This is they control everything. So by not talking to you, you're stopped.
Right, and the local Facebook pages, they've got administrators
that say you can't talk about that.
You can't talk about that. Boom, it's gone. You can't do this. Boom.
Right. So we need to stand up, right, and get involved.
And and let the voters understand what they are voting for and why we're taking the position that we're taking. It's only from becoming involved and digging deep. And these are complex issues. They're complex to get to the bottom of, and reading RSAs and what the requirements actually are. And the average citizen doesn't put the time into that.
Right.
And then it doesn't get advertised. And so when
we get made out to be nutcases.
And we get made out to be the bad guys, when in fact we're trying to do the right thing. And I believe, as Al said, I believe our clerks and moderators are trying to do the right thing too. I think Secretary of State is trying to do the right thing if he had the answers. I'm not sure he has the answers to the problem.
Got you. They're all still paddling in the same pool of sludge,
but
and they can't get out.
But somebody has to admit it.
And somebody's responsible.
Yep.
Right? In this case, unfortunately, it's going to be the selectman. It's going to be the town clerk in this case. There are 39 shells that they're supposed to do. Mike will talk about an operations plan that they're supposed to follow. It's very simple. The Secretary of State put it in there. A, B, C, D, E. This is what you do.
Yep.
How many? Almost of the 7 towns?
Zero
failed.
Passed.
Zero.
Yeah.
No, zero had an operation plan. Continuity of operation plan, zero.
None. Of the 7 we audited.
There's 39 shalls in the model that they present.
Yeah.
And there is a requirement in the election manual that says submit your plan to the Secretary of State.
And they haven't.
0 for 7.
And the Secretary of State never told them that they were in violation. It's up to us, the people, to find this. So once again, Mr. Scanlon is responsible, and he has to either lead or get out of the way.
And you have to acknowledge that you have a problem before you can fix it. And that doesn't really happen.
Right. So by not talking about it and not shining a light on it, then we don't have to deal with it.
Well, nobody that's responsible for it wants to admit that it's failing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that nobody would want to do that. But at some point, you have to face the facts. This is too big an issue. It's too important an issue. If we don't have election integrity,
we don't have anything.
We have nothing.
Right.
We have nothing.
And it seems to me, you're exactly right, Al, when you said, that if you say anything, oh, you're attacking the town clerk, you hate her or him, and they do so much work. And we're not saying that. Everything's about emotions. And if all these elections were wrong, all those people really didn't win. Is that all you care about, is your feelings and whether they won or not? We need to be looking at...
It's our duty. Article 8 tells us.
It's your duty to make sure that laws are followed, that the people we elected are doing their job. And I remember somebody saying to me years ago, well, you can't fight City Hall. I guess that's where it started to fail. You do fight City Hall.
To fight City Hall.
And, what little I know and what I've learned over the, past couple of years, this is absolutely brilliant. This is so well done. I think people need to, how can they reach out to you? Who can they reach out to find out more about what's going on in your town? How can they help? How can they research? What can they get?
Patriot Hub, too, is doing
Yeah, certainly go through Patriot Hub. You can use your website. I don't mind taking emails, but Lou Gargiulo would certainly be open to hearing too. The candidates deserve a fair election. Mm-hmm. And I don't know of any candidate that objects to losing if they know they lost fair and square.
Right.
It's when there's questions that surround it that people get very uptight, very upset, and say, why do I bother? And it breeds apathy. Mm-hmm. That's the last place we want to be.
It's interesting because in Mike's town of Rye, the people who were against recall had a vote and, were in an election, lost, and then asked for a recount.
Yeah, that was fun.
You can't make this stuff up.
Hey, look what happened in Sandown. Yeah. 51 vote difference changed.
54, yeah.
54 vote. They put somebody in, they sworn somebody in that wasn't rightfully in. Thank God for one of our great volunteers, Linda.
Yep.
Linda Brown was able to find a simple math error and reinstate the right person.
And it was actually just a transposition error.
Yeah.
So you had a tape result transposed onto an ROV, a return of vote.
Ah.
But what's key about that is you had a 54 discrepancy in the vote count that is supposed to be reconciled. We're only talking about 666 votes. You need to reconcile it.
They need to match.
If you had a $54 error at your bank, the world would shut down.
Yep.
Nobody goes home until we find out where the $54 is.
Mm-hmm.
In this particular instance, they called an election result and didn't bother reconciling the numbers that were 54 off. So that's a systemic.
Wow.
It's a systemic breakdown. You need to understand where that 54 votes went.
Yep.
If you looked for it, you would have identified the transposition error.
Right.
And then you would have had the right result. But that's just an example of the breakdown.
And why was there just one person? When you anything you do, somebody looks over you to.
Correct. There should always be two people, extra set of eyes. And the whole thing
it's never
is
one.
Yeah.
Right.
It's never the responsibility of an individual.
Correct. There should be at least two people, and everybody should be looking at it and double checking and triple checking.
Why do they require two witnesses? In elections, especially that system, you have oversight.
Yep.
You need to follow those guidelines and implement what's in place. When you ignore it, that's the result you get. So the elections in March, they overturned it, April 2nd or April 3rd, after the error was found. There's a lot of harm done in between. Mm-hmm. You had a loser become a winner, a winner become a loser. You have a town.
And what decisions were made in between?
And sure.
Trust. Trust is like a soap bubble. Once it's broken, it's over.
There's no fixing it.
No, it's just unhealthy.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much, and thanks for staying for the extra time. I appreciate it.
Thank you
and
so
next
much.
week we're going to have Lou Gargiulo. Did I say that correctly? Gargiulo on. So he's going to talk about this from his point of view, what he wanted to accomplish, what was done. And again, thank you to Al Brandano for all your exhaustive work, and Michael Bean, and all the 700
man hours. But there's some Linda Brown, Brenda.
Yeah.
Brenda
James-
Town, Linda
Brenda
Brown.
Town, Linda James, Goodwin.
Deb Rue.
I mean, Deb Rue.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a list, which not us. There's
Right.
a whole bunch with us.
There's a lot of people, and we're all
Yes.
trying to do the right thing. We're all trying to follow the law. We're all trying to point out what can be fixed and what could be made better, because the bottom line is our vote must count.
None of this happens if Lou didn't have the courage to go through with a recount.
So thank
of
you
it.
to Lou. And we'll go over this next week, and I'll show you these again. So stay tuned till next week. The fun never ends on Just Jocelyn. Have a great day. Always bringing you something, you know. It's always fun here. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. And remember, this is the United States of America, and it's your duty to make sure laws are followed and our elected officials do as we say. And I don't say that lightly, and I don't mean that mean. But do as we say. That's why they were elected. See you next time.